The stars were quiet in the outer rim. They always were. Commander Velthax stood at the viewing window of his ship, the gentle whisper, and watched the endless black stretch before him. His large silver eyes reflected the distant lights of 1,000 suns. He had served in the Galactic Survey Fleet for 30 cycles, and he had seen many strange things. But nothing had prepared him for what his sensors would find that day. "Commander, we have something," said Mirith, his junior analyst. She was young, barely 5 cycles into her service, and her voice carried the excitement of someone who had not yet learned to fear the unknown. Her blue skin glowed faintly under the soft lights of the bridge. "There is a ship. It is drifting near the asteroid field." Velthax turned slowly. His long, thin body moved with the careful grace of his people, the Korani. They were not built for speed or strength. Evolution had made them thinkers, not fighters. Their bones were light, their muscles weak by galactic standards. But their minds were sharp, and that had been enough to build an empire that stretched across 100 star systems. "Show me," he said. The main screen flickered to life. At first, Velthax thought he was looking at a piece of debris. The object was battered and broken, its surface covered in scars and burns. Long gouges ran along its hull where something had torn through the metal. Pieces of it were missing entirely, exposing the inner structure to the cold of space. "It should not exist," Mirith said softly. "The damage is too severe. Any ship built to known standards would have been destroyed completely. But somehow, it is still holding together." Velthax felt a cold sensation move through his body. It was not temperature. Korani did not feel cold easily. It was fear, a primal thing that lived deep in the oldest parts of his brain. Something was wrong with this picture. Something did not fit. "Scan for life signs," he ordered. Mirith worked her console. The seconds stretched like hours. Then her hand stopped moving. She looked up at him, and her eyes were wide with something he had never seen in her before: terror. "Commander," she whispered, "there are life signs. 17 of them. They are alive in there." "Impossible," said Velthax. He stepped closer to her station and looked at the readings himself. What he saw made his heart stop for a moment. The interior of the ship was filled with a toxic atmosphere. Nitrogen and oxygen mixed in proportions that would poison most species within minutes. The gravity reading showed a pull that was almost 10 times the Korani standard. The radiation levels inside would cause cellular breakdown in any known organic life form within hours. And yet, 17 beings were living in that nightmare. Not just surviving, living. Their life signs were strong and stable. Some of them were even moving around. "What are they?" Velthax asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Mirith's fingers trembled as she accessed the galactic database. The computer searched through millions of entries, comparing the ship's design, the atmospheric readings, the biological signatures. It took only moments to find a match. When the results appeared on screen, Mirith made a sound that Velthax had never heard from a Korani before. It was something between a gasp and a scream. "Sol 3, she said. "The ship comes from Sol 3. Velthax felt his legs grow weak. He had to grip the edge of her console to keep himself standing. Sol 3. Every spacefaring species knew that name. Every child learned about it in their first education cycles. It was a warning, a lesson, a reminder of how cruel the universe could be. Sol 3 was a Class 15 death world, the highest possible rating. The Galactic Council had classified thousands of planets over millions of years. Most habitable worlds were Class 1 through 3, safe, gentle, places where life could grow without constant threat. Class 5 worlds were considered harsh. Class 7 worlds were dangerous. Class 10 worlds were death traps where only the most primitive life could survive. No one had ever found a Class 15 world with intelligent life. The mathematics said it was impossible. A planet with that level of hostility would kill any species before they could develop beyond basic survival instincts. There would be no time for culture, no time for science, no time for anything except running and fighting and dying. But Sol 3 had broken the mathematics. Somehow, impossibly, a species had risen from that hellish rock. They had not just survived. They had built cities. They had created art and music and literature. They had split the atom and walked on their own moon. And now, they had reached the stars. Velthax pulled up the file on Sol 3 and forced himself to read. The planet had crushing gravity that would flatten a Karani in seconds. Its temperature swung wildly between extremes that would freeze or boil most organic matter. The surface was covered in liquid water that moved in massive waves and fell from the sky in storms. The ground itself shook and split open without warning. Fire erupted from mountains. The air carried invisible poisons and diseases that evolved constantly to overcome any defense, and the life forms. The file described creatures with hundreds of teeth, animals that could run faster than any Karani vehicle, insects that swarmed in numbers beyond counting, plants that produced poison and plants that ate flesh. Every level of the food chain was a battlefield. Every day was a war for survival. The beings who had evolved on this world called themselves humans. The file showed images of them. They looked almost peaceful in the pictures. 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin in various shades of brown and pink. Their eyes faced forward, a clear sign of a predator species. Their teeth included sharp points for tearing meat. Their bodies were dense with muscle and heavy bones. They should not exist, Velthax said. Nothing from that world should be able to think, let alone build ships. Commander, Ririth said, I am picking up a transmission from the ship. They are asking for help. Velthax closed his eyes. Every instinct told him to run, to turn the gentle whisper around and fly as fast as possible in the opposite direction. These creatures were from a world that would kill him in seconds. They breathed poison and lived under gravity that would crush his bones. They were monsters shaped by the most hostile environment in the known galaxy, but they were asking for help. And the Karani had not built their civilization by turning away from those in need. Bring us alongside, Velthax ordered. His voice did not shake. He was proud of that. Prepare a boarding party, full environmental suits, and tell everyone to be careful. We do not know what we are dealing with. As the gentle whisper moved toward the broken ship, Velthax looked at the image of the humans one more time. 17 of them, alive in conditions that should have killed anything. He wondered what kind of beings could possibly call such a hell their home. He was about to find out. Captain Jake Morrison opened his eyes to darkness and pain. His head was pounding like a drum, and there was blood on his face. He could taste it in his mouth, copper and salt. For a moment, he did not know where he was or what had happened. Then the memories came flooding back. The asteroid. It had come out of nowhere, hidden by a sensor blind spot until it was too late. The collision had torn through the USS Resolute like a knife through paper. He remembered the alarms, the screaming, the horrible sound of metal breaking apart. He remembered shouting orders that no one could hear over the chaos. Jake pushed himself up from the floor. His body protested, but he ignored it. Pain was just information. It told you something was wrong, but it did not have to stop you. He had learned that lesson a long time ago, back on Earth. Back when he was just a boy learning to survive. The bridge was destroyed. Consoles were shattered. Wires hung from the ceiling like dead vines. Emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. Jake checked himself quickly. Nothing was broken. The blood was from a cut on his forehead, already starting to clot. He would live, but how many others had not been so lucky? Jake made his way through the wreckage, climbing over debris and squeezing through gaps that had once been doorways. The ship was dying. He could feel it in the vibrations under his feet, hear it in the groans of stressed metal. They did not have much time. He found the cargo bay after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Dr. Megan Torres was there, her dark hair tied back in a messy ponytail, her hands covered in blood that was not her own. She was bent over a crewman, pressing bandages against a wound in his side. How bad? Jake asked. Megan looked up. Her eyes were tired but steady. She was tough. Jake had always known that about her. She had grown up in a rough neighborhood, had fought her way through medical school, had chosen to serve in space when she could have had an easy life on Earth. Nothing broke her. We lost 32 people in the initial impact, she said. Her voice was flat, controlled. Emotions would come later, when there was time. 17 survivors, including us. Most have injuries, but nothing I cannot handle with what we have left. Jake nodded. 32 dead. Friends, colleagues, people he had sworn to protect. He pushed the grief down deep where it could not reach him. Not yet. Not now. Connor? He asked. Engineering section. He's trying to get power back online. Jake found Chief Engineer Connor Walsh buried up to his waist in a broken power conduit. The big man was covered in grease and burns, but he was smiling. Connor always smiled when he was working on something difficult. He said it helped him think. Tell me something good, Jake said. Connor pulled himself out of the conduit and wiped his hands on his pants. I can give you basic life support and gravity. Maybe some lights? But the main engine is gone, Captain. We are not going anywhere on our own power. Communications? Larva is working on it. She thinks she can get a signal out, but it will be weak. We might be shouting into empty space. Jake put his hand on Connor's shoulder. Do what you can. That is all any of us can do. The next few hours were a blur of activity. They moved the wounded to the cargo bay, which had suffered the least damage. They sealed off the sections that were open to space. They rationed their food and water. They did everything they could to survive Dot, and then the alien ship appeared. Lieutenant Katie Brennan saw it first on the emergency sensors. Captain, we have contact. Unknown vessel approaching. Jake moved to her station. Katie was young, barely 25, but she had the instincts of a born soldier. Her hand was already resting on the weapon at her hip. Easy, Jake said. We do not know if they are hostile. We do not know if they are friendly either. The alien ship was beautiful. That was the first thing Jake noticed. It was smooth and elegant, all curves and flowing lines. It looked like something made by artists, not engineers. It moved slowly, carefully, as if it was afraid of startling them. Larva Simmons managed to pick up their transmission. They are asking if we need help, she said. There was wonder in her voice. Captain, they are offering to help us. Jake felt something loosen in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to survive this after all. The docking procedure took almost an hour. The alien ship had to extend a special tube to connect with their airlock because their systems were completely incompatible. When the seal was finally complete, Jake gathered his crew at the entrance. 17 humans, battered and bloody, but still standing. The airlock opened. The aliens were tall and thin, almost delicate. Their skin was pale blue, and their eyes were large and silver. They wore bulky suits that covered their entire bodies, and they moved like they were walking through water. Slow, careful, struggling. The leader stepped forward. He held up a small device that emitted a series of sounds. After a moment, words came out in broken English. I am Commander Velthax. We come in peace. We wish to help you. Jake extended his hand. It was a human gesture, a sign of friendship. Velthax stared at it for a long moment. then slowly reached out his own hand. When they touched, Jake felt the alien flinch. His grip was light, fragile. Jake was careful not to squeeze. "Captain Jake Morrison," he said. "Thank you for coming." Over the next hour, Jake watched the aliens react to everything around them with barely hidden terror. They moved through the ship like they expected the walls to attack them. When one of them saw a crewman lift a heavy piece of equipment, he let out a sound of pure fear. When Megan mentioned the temperature was 15 degrees Celsius, the translator rendered it as dangerously cold. But it was when Connor casually picked up a fallen metal beam to clear a path that everything changed. The beam weighed at least 200 kilograms. Connor lifted it like it was nothing, tossed it aside, and kept walking. Every alien in the room froze. Their eyes went wide. Some of them reached for devices at their belts that looked like weapons. "What is wrong?" Jake asked. Velthax's voice was shaking when he replied. "That beam. It would take 4 of my strongest crew to lift it. Your engineer moved it with one arm." Jake looked at Connor, then back at the aliens. He was starting to understand. They were not the weak ones here. The humans were not the ones in danger. The aliens were. They had come to rescue what they thought were helpless survivors. Instead, they had found something else entirely. Creatures who breathed poison air and walked in crushing gravity. Creatures who lifted impossible weights and survived temperatures that would kill most species. Creatures from a world so hostile that simply existing there required strength and toughness, beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans were not victims. They were monsters, and they had not even realized it until now. Jake looked at his crew. Katie with her soldier's instincts. Connor with his impossible strength. Megan with her steady hands that had saved lives in conditions that would have killed any Karani doctor. Laura, who was already learning the alien language just by listening to it. Ryan Costa, who had navigated through asteroid fields that no alien pilot would dare attempt. They were all monsters. Every single one of them. And as Jake looked at the fear in Velthax's silver eyes, he realized that everything was about to change. The days that followed were strange for everyone. The humans needed help that only the Karani could provide. The Karani had resources and technology that could save lives. The working together was like trying to mix fire and water. Everything was different. Everything was dangerous. And everyone was afraid. The humans were afraid of accidentally hurting their new allies. The Karani were afraid of everything else. Connor Walsh spent most of his time in the engineering section, trying to repair the damaged systems with Karani help. It was frustrating work. The alien technicians were smart, brilliant even, but they could not survive in the human sections of the ship. The gravity alone would kill them in minutes. So they had to work through a complex system of remote tools and communication devices. Move the connector to the left, said a Karani technician named Rels through the communicator. His voice was high and thin, like a bird singing. Connor looked at the piece in his hands. It was delicate work, the kind that required patience and precision. On a Karani ship, it would take a team of specialists and hours of careful preparation. Connor did it in 30 seconds with his bare hands. "Done," he said. There was silence on the other end. "Then, that is not possible. The tolerances require at least 4 separate adjustments with specialized tools." Connor shrugged, even though Rels could not see it. "I have steady hands." What he did not say was that human hands had evolved to grip stone tools and throw spears at moving targets. What he did not say was that every human child learned fine motor control by doing tasks that would be considered impossibly complex by Karani standards. What he did not say was that he had rebuilt engines in the middle of hurricanes, in freezing cold and burning heat, with broken fingers and blood in his eyes. On Earth, Connor was just an average mechanic. Out here, He was something else entirely. In the medical bay, Megan Torres was having similar experiences. The Karani had advanced medical technology, machines that could scan a body down to the cellular level, and drugs that could cure diseases humans had never even heard of. But they could not understand how humans healed. "This is not possible," said the Karani doctor, a thin creature named Seleth. She was staring at a scan of Katie Brennan's arm. Katie had broken it during the asteroid collision. 3 days ago, the bone had been snapped clean in two. Now it was nearly healed, the fracture already knitting itself back together. "Human bones are good at healing," Megan explained. She tried to keep her voice gentle. The Karani seemed to startle easily. "We break them all the time." "All the time?" Seleth looked like she might faint. "On Earth, most humans will break at least one bone in their lifetime. Many break several. Kids especially. They fall out of trees, crash their bikes, fight with each other. It is part of growing up." Seleth's large silver eyes were wide with horror. "Your children fight each other?" Megan thought about her own childhood. The playground battles, the wrestling matches with her brothers, the scraped knees and bloody noses that were just part of a normal day. She thought about how to explain that to a species that had probably never experienced physical violence in their entire evolutionary history. "It is how we learn," she said finally. "We learn our limits by pushing past them. We learn to be strong by challenging ourselves. It is not cruelty. It is practice for life." Seleth was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Your world must be very terrible to require such preparation." Megan considered the question. Earth, her home. The blue marble hanging in the black void of space. She thought about hurricanes and earthquakes, about lions and sharks, and the tiny bacteria that killed millions every year. She thought about wars and famines, about ice ages and mass extinctions. She thought about how humanity had clawed its way up from the mud, fighting every step of the way against a planet that seemed determined to kill them. "It is not terrible," she said. "It is home. We love it." Seleth made a sound that might have been disbelief. Or maybe it was awe. Meanwhile, Ryan Costa was working with the Karani navigation team to calculate a course that would get both ships to safety. The work was easy for him. Navigation had always come naturally. His brain just understood space, understood the way objects moved and interacted, understood the invisible forces that shaped the universe. The Karani navigators watched him work with something like fear in their eyes. He solved in minutes problems that would take them hours. He spotted errors in their calculations that their computers had missed. He drew flight paths through asteroid fields that they considered suicidal, but were actually perfectly safe if you knew what you were doing. "How do you see it?" one of them asked. Her name was Yineth, and she was the chief navigator of the Gentle Whisper. "How do you understand the patterns so quickly?" Ryan thought about it. On Earth, humans had navigated for thousands of years without technology. They had crossed oceans using only the stars and the wind. They had walked across continents guided by nothing but instinct and observation. The human brain had evolved to find paths, to recognize patterns, to predict where things would be before they got there. It was how they had hunted prey that was faster and stronger than them. It was how they had survived. "Practice," he said, because it was easier than explaining millions of years of evolution. But the moment that truly changed everything happened on the fourth day. A section of the Karani ship developed a hull breach. A small asteroid had struck them during the docking procedure, and the damage had slowly grown worse. Now atmosphere was leaking into space, and 3 Karani crew members were trapped in a section that was rapidly losing pressure. There was no time for rescue parties, no time for careful planning. The Karani did not have suits that could handle the breach zone. They did not have the strength to seal the rupture manually. They were going to die. Derek Russo did not ask for permission. He did not wait for orders. He simply walked to the nearest airlock, stripped down to a basic emergency suit, and stepped outside. The Karani watched on their monitors in stunned silence as the human walked through the vacuum of space. They watched as he grabbed a torn metal with his bare hands and bent it back into shape. They watched as he held his breath, his face turning red, his veins bulging, as he worked without air for nearly 3 minutes. They watched as he sealed the breach with a combination of brute force and desperate improvisation. Then they watched as he walked back inside, removed his helmet, and asked if anyone had water. The Karani medics rushed to scan him, certain that he must be dying. What they found shocked them even more than the rescue itself. Derek Russo was fine. His body had not suffered any permanent damage. He was tired, a little cold, but otherwise healthy. He had survived something that would have killed any Karani in seconds. Commander Velfax stood before the human security officer and could not find words. His entire understanding of the universe had been shattered. Everything he knew about what was possible and impossible had been proven wrong. How? He finally managed to ask. Derek Russo just shrugged. On Earth, we learn to push through. It is what we do. When someone needs help, you help them. Even if it hurts. Even if it is dangerous. You just do it. Velfax looked at this impossible creature from an impossible world. He thought about his own crew, about how they would react to such a situation. They would calculate risks. They would consider alternatives. They would be smart and careful and safe, and they would have let those 3 crew members die. But not the humans. The humans did not calculate. They did not hesitate. They just acted. They threw themselves into danger without a second thought because someone needed help. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the most wonderful thing Velfax had ever seen. For the first time since meeting the humans, he felt something other than fear. He felt hope. The message from the Galactic Council arrived on the 5th day. Commander Velfax read it alone in his quarters, and with each word, his heart sank deeper into his chest. The Council was afraid. He could see it in the formal language, in the carefully chosen phrases that tried to hide panic behind protocol. They had received his reports about the humans. They had analyzed the data, and they had reached a conclusion that filled Velfax with cold dread. Humanity was a threat. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Representative Thelmira, the senior member of the council, had written the message herself. She demanded answers. How had this happened? How had a Class 15 death world produced intelligent life? And more importantly, what was to be done about it? The options she listed were clear: containment, isolation, or, if necessary, elimination. Velfax put down the message and closed his eyes. He thought about Jake Morrison, who led his crew with quiet strength and never asked anyone to do something he would not do himself. He thought about Megan Torres, who had treated Karani injuries with the same care she showed her own people. He thought about Connor Walsh, who laughed while doing impossible work. He thought about Derek Russo, who had walked through the void to save people he did not even know. These were not monsters. These were people. Strange, terrifying, impossibly strong people, but people nonetheless. But how could he explain that to a council that had never met them? How could he describe what it felt like to watch a human smile, to hear them laugh, to see the kindness behind their predator eyes? On the Resolute, the humans were having their own revelations. Jake had called a meeting in the cargo bay. All 17 survivors were present, along with several Karani who had grown brave enough to visit the human sections in their protective suits. The atmosphere was heavy with tension and uncertainty. "We need to talk about what we have learned," Jake said. His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it. "About what we are." Katie Brennan spoke first. She had always been direct, even blunt. It was what made her a good soldier. We are weapons, she said. Walking weapons. Everything about us is designed to fight, to survive, to kill. The Karani are afraid of us, and they should be. That is not fair, said Laura Simmons. The communications officer had spent the most time with the aliens, learning their language and their culture. They are not just afraid. They are also curious. Some of them admire us. Admire us? Connor laughed, but there was no humor in it. They look at us like we are going to eat them. Some of them do, Lavra admitted. But not all. Valfax has been asking me questions about Earth. Not scared questions. Interested questions. He wants to understand us. Jake raised his hand for silence. The question is not whether they fear us or admire us. The question is what happens next. We are the first humans to make contact with alien life. Everything we do, everything we say, will shape how the galaxy sees our species. The room went quiet. Everyone understood the weight of that responsibility. Megan Torres stepped forward. She had been thinking about this for days, turning the problem over in her mind like a puzzle she could not solve. I have been studying the Karani medical files, she said, and looking at the Galactic database. Do you know what I found? No one answered. They were all waiting. There are thousands of intelligent species in this galaxy. Thousands of civilizations, each with their own history and culture and technology. But none of them are like us. She paused, letting that sink in. They evolved on safe worlds. Gentle worlds. Places where life was easy and survival was guaranteed. They never had to fight for anything. They never had to be strong. And that is bad? Ryan asked. Not bad. Just different. The galaxy is full of thinkers and dreamers and artists. But it is also full of predators. Species that prey on the weak because the weak cannot fight back. Megan's eyes were hard. The Karani have enemies. Species that attack their ships, raid their colonies, kill their people. And they cannot stop them because they were never built for violence. Understanding dawned on the faces around her. We were, Katie said. It was not a boast. Just a fact. Jake nodded slowly. So the question is, what do we do with that? We could conquer. We could dominate. With our strength, we could probably take over the entire galaxy if we wanted to. But we would not want to, Connor said. Would we? The question hung in the air. Jake thought about human history. The wars, the conquests, the empires built on blood and bones. Humanity had done terrible things. They had hurt each other in ways that would horrify the Karani. They had been cruel and violent and ruthless, but they had also been kind. They had built hospitals and schools. They had created art and music that made people weep with joy. They had sacrificed themselves for strangers. They had loved with a fierceness that could move mountains. Humanity was both. Monster and hero. Destroyer and creator. They held both possibilities inside them, and every day they chose which one to be. No, Jake said finally. We would not want to conquer. That is not who we are. Not anymore. Not ever again. He looked at his crew, at these survivors who had endured so much and were still standing. They were the best of humanity. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they chose to be good. They chose to help. They chose to protect. The galaxy is afraid of us, Jake said. And maybe they should be. But fear does not have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning. They can fear us, and then they can learn that we are not a threat. We are a shield. We are protection. We are the thing that stands between the weak and the predators that would hurt them. Katie smiled. It was a warrior's smile, sharp and proud. We become the apex predators who protect instead of hunt. Exactly, Jake said. We show them that strength does not have to mean cruelty. Power does not have to mean domination. We show them what humanity can be at its best. On the gentle whisper, Commander Velthax was composing his response to the council. He had spent hours thinking about what to say, how to explain what he had witnessed. In the end, he decided on honesty. "I have met the humans," he wrote. "I have seen their strength and their strangeness. They are everything we feared and more. They are dangerous beyond measure." He paused, then continued. "But they are also something else, something we did not expect. They are kind. They are loyal. They risk their lives for strangers. They have every reason to dominate us, and instead they offer friendship." He thought about Derek Russo, walking through the void to save Karani lives. He thought about Megan Torres, treating injuries with gentle hands that could break bones without effort. He thought about Jake Morrison, who carried the weight of first contact on his shoulders and still found time to learn every Karani crew member's name. "I believe we have a choice," Velthax wrote. "We can make enemies of humanity, and they will be the most terrible enemies the galaxy has ever known. Or we can make friends of them, and they will be the greatest protectors we have ever had." He finished the message and sent it before he could change his mind. The future of two species hung on what happened next. The distress signal came at dawn, ship time. A burst of static and fear that cut through the quiet like a knife. Lavra Simmons was the first to hear it, and her face went pale as she translated the words. "Vrex," she said. "The Karani are calling for help. The Vrex have found us." Jake Morrison moved to her station immediately. "Who are the Vrex?" Commander Velthax answered through the communication link. His voice was tight with terror. "Raiders, predators. They hunt weaker species for resources and slaves. My people have lost many ships to them. How many are coming?" "One cruiser, 50 warriors. More than enough to kill us all." Velthax paused. His next words were heavy with shame. "Captain Morrison, I am sorry. We should run. We should leave you and try to escape. It is what my crew wants. It is what makes sense." Jake looked around at his crew. 17 survivors, battered, exhausted, stranded on a broken ship with limited weapons and no hope of escape. The smart choice was obvious. Hide in the wreckage. Let the Karani flee. Wait for the Vrex to leave. But humans had never been good at making the smart choice. "No," Jake said. "You came to help us. You could have left us to die, but you did not. Now it is our turn. You cannot be serious." Velthax's voice cracked. "The Vrex are killers. They have armor and weapons and training. Your people are wounded and weak." Katie Brennan laughed. It was not a kind sound. "Weak? Sir, with all respect, you have no idea what weak means. We have been fighting since before your species learned to walk upright. We have survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. 50 raiders?" She smiled, and even through the screen, Velthax flinched at the sight. 50 raiders is a slow Tuesday. The humans began to prepare. They did not have much. A few hand weapons that had survived the crash. Some tools that could be used as clubs. The remains of their emergency suits. But they had something more valuable than equipment. They had 10,000 years of combat evolution hardwired into their DNA. They had reflexes honed by generations of predators. They had bodies built for violence and minds that refused to quit. Derek Russo organized the defense. He had been Special Forces before he joined the space program, trained in a dozen different forms of combat. He looked at the others and saw potential everywhere. Connor was a powerhouse who could break walls with his fists. Katie was fast and precise, a natural killer. Even the scientists and engineers had something to offer. Megan knew anatomy, knew exactly where to strike to disable an enemy. Ryan understood spatial awareness, could predict movement patterns. Lavra had studied dozens of alien languages, which meant she understood alien psychology. "We do not need to beat them," Derek explained. "We just need to make them stop wanting to fight. Predators hunt because it is easy. We make it hard, they will leave." The Vrex cruiser arrived 2 hours later. It was an ugly thing, all sharp angles and dark metal. It moved like a shark through water, confident and hungry. The boarding pods launched without warning, punching through the Gentle Whisper's hull in 3 different locations. The Vrex warriors, who poured through expected easy prey. They had done this hundreds of times. Board a Karani ship, kill anyone who resists, take the rest as slaves. It was simple. It was profitable. It was fun. What they found instead was something from a nightmare. The first group ran into Connor Walsh in a narrow corridor. The big human did not use weapons. He did not need them. He grabbed the lead Vrex by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. The alien warrior weighed almost twice what Connor did. It did not matter. Connor threw him into his companions like a bowling ball, then waded into the chaos with his fists swinging. The second group found Katie Brennan waiting in the cargo bay. She had improvised a weapon from a metal pipe and some wire. It was crude. It was brutal. It was effective. She moved through the Vrex like a dancer, each strike precise and devastating. They had never seen anything move so fast. They had never felt anything hit so hard. The third group encountered Derek Russo. There were no survivors to report. What happened? The Karani security cameras recorded it, though. Later, when Velthax watched the footage, he had to turn it off after 30 seconds. It was too much. The speed, the violence, the absolute efficiency of it. Derek did not fight like a person. He fought like a force of nature. Jake Morrison found the Vrex commander on the bridge of the Gentle Whisper. The alien was tall and covered in natural armor, with claws that could tear through metal and teeth that could crush bone. He had killed hundreds of Karani over his career. He had never lost a battle. He lost this one. It was not even close. Jake was faster, stronger, more resilient. Every wound that would have killed a Karani just made Jake angrier. Every attack that should have ended the fight only made Jake push harder. In the end, the Vrex commander lay on the floor, broken and gasping, staring up at the human who stood over him. "Tell your people," Jake said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them about the creatures from Sol 3. Tell them that these waters are protected now." The Vrex fled. Their cruiser turned and ran at maximum speed, broadcasting warnings on every frequency. Avoid the vessel with the Sol 3 creatures. Do not engage. Do not approach. Death lives there. In the aftermath, the Gentle Whisper was quiet. The Karani crew emerged from their hiding places and looked around at the destruction. Blood and broken bodies everywhere. Damage to the hull that would take weeks to repair. And in the middle of it all, 17 humans, standing tall despite their wounds. Commander Velthax approached Jake Morrison. The human was covered in blood, most of it not his own. He should have been terrifying. And he was. But there was something else there, too. Something that Velthax was only beginning to understand. "You did not have to do that," Velthax said. "You could have hidden. You could have saved yourselves." Jake shook his head. "No, we could not. Why? Why risk your lives for us? We are strangers. We are weak. By your standards, we are barely worth noticing." Jake was quiet for a moment. He thought about Earth, about humanity, about all the things they had done wrong and all the things they had done right. He thought about his grandfather, who had carried wounded soldiers through enemy fire. He thought about his mother, who had spent her life teaching children in the poorest schools. He thought about every human who had ever reached out a hand to help someone who needed it. "Because that is what we do," he said finally. We are strong because our world made us strong. But strength without purpose is just destruction. We had to learn that lesson the hard way. We had to hurt each other, hurt our planet, hurt everything we touched before we understood. He met Velthax's silver eyes with his own brown ones. We are not monsters, Commander. Not anymore. We are protectors. We find people who cannot protect themselves, and we stand in front of them. We take the hits so they do not have to. That is what humanity is. That is who we choose to be. Velthax felt something shift inside him. All his fear, all his uncertainty, all his doubts seemed to melt away. He had spent his whole life thinking that strength was the opposite of kindness. He had believed that those who could destroy would always choose to destroy, but the humans had proven him wrong. They were the strongest beings in the galaxy, and they had chosen to use that strength for protection. They had chosen to be shields instead of swords. I would like to be your friend, Velthax said. The words felt strange in his mouth, but also right. My people would like to be your friends. Would humanity accept us? Jake Morrison smiled. It was a human smile, full of teeth and warmth, and for the first time, Velthax did not find it frightening. That is why we came out here, Jake said. We've been alone on that death world for a long time. We were hoping to find some friends. He extended his hand and Velthax took it. The grip was gentle, careful, full of restrained power and genuine affection. Welcome to the galaxy, Velthax said. I think you are going to change everything. Jake looked at his crew, at the Karani around them, at the stars visible through the damaged hull. Somewhere out there was Earth, spinning in its orbit around an ordinary sun. His home, his people. They had come so far, survived so much, and now they stood on the edge of something new. Yeah, he said. I think we are. And so humanity took its first steps into a galaxy that would never be the same. They brought with them their strength and their violence, their resilience and their rage. But they also brought their love, their loyalty, and their endless capacity for hope. The galaxy had discovered a ship from a Class 15 death world. They'd found monsters aboard. But sometimes monsters are exactly what you need.